Welcome back in, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King, joined here by Christian Clemente and Jason Caldwell, as it is transfer portal season all across the board. Pretty much everywhere you look, just scrolling on Twitter today, that's everything that is happening every single day. So welcome to the modern version of the offseason in both football and basketball. You've got basically free agency going on, and Auburn has been very active. What'd you say?
It's trade season.
It is trade season for UCLA and
Absolutely.
Tennessee. Yes.
Oh my goodness. Yep. It's only a matter of time before we start seeing holdouts. It's only a matter of time before we start seeing trades. You never know what's coming down the pipeline in college sports nowadays. But both Hugh Freeze and Bruce Pearl's programs have been very, very busy. We're going to touch on both of those today, what they've been working on and what is left for both programs in the transfer portal. But we'll start with football. Christian and Jason, y'all been up at the complex as of late because football portal opened, and right after spring practice, that was the focus for this team. Turn the page and knock down a few needs in the transfer portal, and they've already done that. They've already done that with a trio of guys so far along the defensive front seven. First of all, Jason, I want to ask you about Jay Hardy coming back to Auburn. He was a guy that was a 4-star recruit back in, I believe, the 2020 class.
Yeah, he was.
If I'm not mistaken. And
Yep,
after heading over to Liberty, so plenty of connections for him. A guy who started his career at Auburn, obviously knows the staff really, really well from his time at Liberty, knows Vontrell King-Williams. And we all talked about it after the spring was over for Auburn. But defensive tackle was going to be the number one priority, and he's the first of two guys they've got so far.
Yeah, I think it's one of those you're hoping for what, and it's almost the same thing. It felt like coming out of high school, saw the athleticism. Remember the videos of Jay Hardy dunking a basketball, and you saw all these things, and you're like, man, you hope that's the guy that can be a Derek Brown type of guy. He's shown some flashes of that, and he's been injured some too in his career too. A couple of years ago, he was pretty good at Liberty. That 23 season, he had a pretty good year, and he was kind of one of those guys. Everybody was waiting for him to take the next step last year. Didn't happen, but he's a bigger body guy, 6'4", listed at 310, maybe even a little bit bigger than that. But Christian, I think you look at him and the two additions on the interior kind of serve a couple of different purposes potentially, but they had to have experienced veteran guys, and Jay Hardy gives them one of those guys, and a guy that could be one of those guys that elevates his game in a big way this year.
Yeah, that's the thing. You needed experience and you needed bodies, and you accomplished that with James Ash and Jay Hardy. Not gonna lie, they visited back-to-back days, and for a while there, I was calling James Ash Jay Ash, or I was just really, really struggling to get those two down, but look, we were talking about it in the pre-show. If you can get a combined 35 snaps out of those two guys a game and get some solid snaps, you probably feel pretty good about what you got. I mean, we were talking about it as well. Have there been any standout defensive linemen that have hit the portal this spring? I mean, the kid from Oklahoma went in and then withdrew his name. Auburn wouldn't have even been able to get him anyway because he would have had to sit out this season anyway with the SEC transfer rule. There's just in the spring portal window, especially at premium positions, it is so hard to find standouts. I mean, the fact that Auburn got Keandre Lambert-Smith last year is kind of a miracle. I don't know how they managed to pull that off and how that worked out so well. I mean, I think I saw someone describe it as the spring portal window as everyone exchanging backups and maybe taking chances on other guys.
Yep.
Taking a chance on a guy like James Ash from FAMU, hoping that he can contribute. Talking with Jay Hardy, he said he's excited to be the older guy in the room. He knows that he's walking into a younger room. He said he's excited to try and take on a leadership role, says he's never really done that at all before. And he thinks that's going to be a new challenge for him. Talking with James Ash, he's a natural leader. He's a guy that I think will step in immediately right away. So even if you can just get a little bit of that veteran voice in that room, that will accomplish something for you. I mean, last spring you got Philip Bleedy, who gave you decent to solid production. He was a good leader coming out of that spring portal window. You're hoping for something like that. You're hoping it's, even if it's just a little bit of production, a little bit of leadership out of those two guys. You feel like you can accomplish that. And a little bit of different players. Jay Hardy, probably more of a nose 3-tech guy. Ash, probably more of just a true 3-tech. So you can you can move these guys around a little bit, get some different versatility out of them. So it's for what you're picking through in terms of portal defensive linemen. It's about as good as you're going to get. I mean, Jason, our guy Josh Horton was in the portal for a little bit out of Miami. The former Langston Hughes guy signed with Georgia. I mean, he played 30 snaps last year. So you're taking chances on guys in the spring. That's all you can do.
100%. I think this is you're hoping in all honesty at basement level you got what you got last year, which is Isaiah Rakes, Philip Bleedy, a guy that can give you maybe a combined 25, 30 snaps. That's kind of basement level. In reality, you'd like to have maybe 40, 45 and guys that are difference maker guys. And Rakes played a role and Bleedy made some plays, but it's hard to go, you're absolutely getting Derek Brown. You're not getting Derek Brown in the portal in the late portal anyway. You know, you might get a Nico Iamaleava, but even then that's not a guy that you go, it's surefire first rounder that I'm getting. It's just hard to find those guys. And so they knew they needed some experienced veteran guys, and they got a couple of those guys up front.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you just kind of touched on it there, Jason. If you're going to make your money in the portal, if you're going to buy yourself some wins for next season, you've got to do it in the first window.
Yeah.
You're getting your Xavier Chaplins, you're getting your Eric Singletons, you're getting your Mason Murphys. You are buying yourself wins out of the first portal window. Those guys aren't in the second portal window.
Nope.
It's just not going to happen.
No, this is more protecting losses than it is buying wins. This is, well, in case of emergency, break the glass time. That's what the spring portal is for most folks. And you're going, okay. I mean, for Auburn, you go defensive line, interior defensive line, and Malik Blockton's back, but man, he's a true sophomore, and Bobby Jameson Travis is back in his third year, but neither one of those guys have probably played a combined 200 snaps. I mean, you're talking about that's it. I mean, Zacchaeus Walker's a guy that you're on, hey, he's going to be a role guy that can play and do some things inside, but they needed some bigger, older bodies to help out Malik Autry and Jordan Crawford, especially, because I think we all believe those guys are going to play and play a lot. But what you don't want to have is have those guys playing 45 snaps a game their first year in Southeastern Conference play and trying to get them to the finish line. These are a couple of guys that can help you ease those guys in. And then we saw it a little bit last year. The more Malik Blockton played, the less we saw of a couple of those transfer guys. I think it could be the same thing this year. But what you like to have is all those guys playing at a high level, and you go, hey, just roll everybody. And that's what you hope you get out of these two guys.
Yeah, we were talking about it before we got rolling. Like, it wouldn't be the craziest expectation to think that Bobby Travis is your starting nose at the beginning of the year. But then, I mean, I know you guys are insanely high on the potential of somebody like a Jordan Crawford. But to your point, Jason, you're now, that's not the immediate expectation for Jordan Crawford is like, hey man, like we don't got a lot going on here. You need to be the starter from day one. That's not the case. That they've got guys they can roll with, like you said. And that's why too, I remember you and I talking about it back in December, Jason, when the quarterback situation was under the microscope and they were looking at these guys, and we were discussing, the positives and negatives of a guy like Jackson Arnold. And I think we said it on a podcast. It was like the biggest positive is that Auburn likes him. And you should just get him. Like you have to make your money there and get your wins in the first portal. If you like a quarterback and you think he's a good fit, don't wait till that second portal window to try to do your work. Get him now and just get him in.
Or even wait till longer and you're going, well, we like this guy a lot, but man, we'd like to have this guy too. Well, you don't ever know if you get to the next guy. And yes, and to me, that's what life felt like a little bit under Gus Malzahn on the offensive line, especially. It was, okay, we like this guy. And they recruit a guy really well, would finish second on an offensive tackle. And then there would be no third, 3, 4, 5 guys. And so you look up and you go, okay, there's nobody there. In the portal window right now, it is absolutely, you better get a fish in the boat and you better feel good about them and go and say, look, we got 3 or 4 guys. Here's our guys. And I think Auburn's done a good job of that, Christian, in going, hey, maybe there's always a pecking order, but maybe you're going, hey, here's 3 guys. We feel good about all 3 of them. let's make a run and then see what happens. And I think they've done that now here in this period as well on the interior defensive line and at linebacker too.
Yeah, I mean, even just big picture. I mean, Freeze has talked about, he's even openly said, like, look, I don't know if I'm a good portal recruiter. He's like, I like to build relationships with these guys and whatnot. And previous cycles, portal didn't go maybe as quite they wanted. When you add guys like Will Redmond and streamline things a little bit more, portal went really well for them first window. The second window, it's been very efficient as well. You got two of your top defensive line guys. They got them in quickly for visits. You got the linebacker that obviously it seems like you wanted because he was the first one that visited, and you got him to sign, the Caleb Wheatland from Maryland. It feels like they have the portal down, at least to a point where they like it and where they want it. And talking about Wheatland, I mean, this is a guy who you trust. DJ Durkin. This is a guy that he picked out, not like Fanaje Gote, who actually played for Durkin at Maryland, but this is the guy that, our Cooper Patagna, who does the portal rankings, was saying, look, linebacker is a relatively thin position in the portal. It's becoming a premium. And Wheatland was one of the best ones out there. And Auburn identified him quickly, got him in for a visit, got him signed. I don't think he even visited anywhere else. So you're moving efficiently. You're getting the guys that you want. You're evaluating these guys quickly, before they're even in the portal. And then once they're in the portal, you're contacting them and getting them on campus, and finding guys that you feel like fit as best you can in this spring window.
Yeah, and from a number standpoint and production standpoint, everybody's kind of pointed to interior defensive line as a bigger need. But from a production standpoint, we'll probably look back at this 3-day window and see that Wheatland's probably the guy that's going to be the most productive out of this group because of, look, there's talent at linebacker. It's a talented group of linebackers. But Robert Woodyard has not started a game. DeMarcus Riddick has started a couple of games as more of a nickel linebacker. And then, LSU transfer, he's played some. That's it. Like that's your total group of experience at linebacker right now for this Auburn team. And now you're bringing in a guy who's played in 35 games and started 11 games last year in the Big Ten. Wasn't necessarily a true middle linebacker. I think he's going to be an inside linebacker in one of those two spots. Auburn really has two inside linebackers. I think he'll translate to that and be I think a big difference for this team. So I thought it was a good addition. And you look at him and a guy that's rushed the passer, 7.5 sacks, something like that in his career.
Sounds right. Yeah. He
sacks.
led Maryland in sacks last year.
Feels a little bit like a Eugene Asante type of guy that's more of an attack guy. That's what it feels like just from numbers and the things you're doing. 227, he can play at 230. Gives you enough size. And so I like the pickup here. And they really had to have a guy. They had to have somebody to come in and give them a veteran presence at linebacker.
Yeah, it's kind of a take what you can get and don't throw a fit.
Yeah, and I think Robert Woodyard is going to be good. I really liked his production and things he did in the spring, and DeMarcus Riddick, but you got to have more than two linebackers, older guys, and the freshman guys I think are going to be good, but man, that's a tough position to jump into in the Southeastern Conference as a true freshman, inside linebacker. I think that veteran guy was a big deal.
Yeah, you mentioned that. I was curious, went and looked at his numbers. Good pass rush grade. Again, take Pro Football Focus for what it's worth. But yeah, 7.5 sacks in his career is correct. 4 sacks last season, a couple pass breakups last season, a fumble recovery, 15 total quarterback pressures on the season, 7 quarterback hurries. So pretty decent coverage numbers too, just kind of all around. Like you mentioned, Christian, like linebackers, it's maybe not as dire as defensive tackle where it's like swarm of mosquitoes if a quality guy goes in the portal, but like it is still a really, really, highly touted position. I think Auburn did a really good job, like you said, of quickly evaluating and moving really quickly, a guy with Power 4 experience. I
feel like we've seen more, at least intriguing defensive linemen go in though than linebackers, to be honest. Because I mentioned Josh Horton, like that's a big body who's young. Like, oh, maybe you can get something there. Like, there was the kid from North Carolina, Joel Starlings, who was going to visit. I don't think he's going to visit anymore because Auburn wanted 2 defensive linemen. Felt like there was at least, they scoured. They found some guys. James Ash from FAMU. You found some intriguing options. I haven't seen hardly anything at linebacker, just to be honest, of guys going in the portal that are productive or could fill the mold of a middle linebacker in the SEC. I really haven't.
Yeah, I think there's certain positions. Honestly, you play more defensive linemen, so there's going to be more options. I think for guys who haven't played yet, they go, "Hey, I want to go get my shot to play." I think that's some of this, and I think that's what you see from Horton. It's not the case for what Auburn has got. And Auburn got 2 guys that were playing, but I think wanted to now challenge themselves at the highest level. So a little different scenario there, but yeah, I mean, like it feels like linebacker because there's just, I mean, most teams now only play 2 of those guys, so there's not as many positions to fill, and there's fewer of them to begin with. Yeah, it makes it a really a priority spot if you need one, because you're right, Christian. There's just not a bunch of those guys out there.
And then we mentioned those were the 2 positions, really, defensive tackle and linebacker, that we highlighted, that Hugh Freeze highlighted right after A-Day. But we knew there were a few other spots that could be addressed, especially with the portal goings, the outgoing side of the portal for Auburn. Lots of defensive backs, a handful of defensive backs since the conclusion of spring, including Tyler Scott at cornerback and J.C. Hart at cornerback. And you have the fact that, as we reported, Devin Williams will not be available his freshman season with a torn ACL. So it makes sense that Auburn is interested in cornerback. Christian, you caught up with Rayshon Pleasant today, a Tulane cornerback transfer. Good season for him last year, 35 tackles and an interception, 3 pass breakups. Again, you have Kane Lee and Jay Crawford, and you have Blake Woodby, and you have Rayon Strader. So, like, you're feeling good about that top group, but from a numbers perspective, you would love to get somebody else who can come in and compete. So tell us a little bit about him and what they're looking at in that position.
Yeah, I think this is not necessarily purely because of the 2 departures and Devin Williams going out, but I think you're looking for another guy, and this is a guy who obviously was productive last year, was productive as a kick returner as well. Housed 2 kicks last year. I think it was only on 13 attempts, if Tulane's stat website is correct. So that's a pretty good success right there. So if you can get a little bit more out of him on special teams as well, bringing him in would be solid. Visited USC already. Mentioned that he was going to go see Ole Miss later this week, although that visit seems like it's a little bit iffy on whether or not it happens. You never know with this portal stuff, but this is a guy that Auburn likes quite a bit. It's interesting because, Nathan, you mentioned all those names. Where does Champ Anthony fit in? He was fantastic when he moved outside to corner last year, but he's definitely on the smaller side. Could be nickel, could be back at safety, could move around, could really do it all. But Auburn clearly feels like it needs another cornerback. So they've been aggressive in pursuing Rayshon Pleasant. Feel like they're in a pretty good spot there. From talking to a couple different people, they feel like they're in a good spot there as well. So it's kind of wait and see mode with him. Wait and see whether or not he visits Ole Miss, and then kind of come to a decision there. It would be, if he doesn't visit Ole Miss, it's Auburn versus Trevon Reed out there at USC to try and land Rayshon Pleasant.
What else are you guys looking at in the portal? Do you think Auburn might be done if they were to get a cornerback?
I don't know that you ever be done, but it feels like they've got a pretty good handle, Christian, on who's in right now. Maybe it matters how this thing finishes, the next couple of days, right?
Yeah, portal closes, I believe, the night of the 25th, so it goes through all of April 25th here.
Yeah, so I think if the right person came up and you're like, hey, this guy would make our team better, and you have spot, then I don't know that it might not even matter what position it was. Now, I don't think they'll go run after a quarterback unless it's a 1-year grad guy who was our guy from a few years ago that came to Auburn for a
Grant
year.
Loy, Cord Sandberg, those type of guys.
Like somebody like that says, look, I just want to come be a part of the team. And you kind of got that guy, but Ashton Daniels is a legit guy. Maybe you get a guy that says, hey, I just want to come in and be a part of a team for a year, and I'll come and be the next guy or whatever. But feels like it might be, hey, if the right guy pops up and feel like it can make your team better, you might do it. But doesn't feel like they're on a mission at the moment.
No, I mean, tight end is a spot that we've highlighted a few times going into the spring portal window. There just really hasn't been a guy that out there in this spring portal window that looks like he could elevate that room, to be honest.
Yeah, and I honestly, what's really interesting too. I really believe the move of Tate Johnson has helped them a good bit, just because the one guy they might go get would be a blocking edge tight end guy. I think now they feel like, man, we got an offensive lineman in that spot. Because the Maryland transfer comes in as a pretty athletic guy, that can do some things, and then obviously Brandon Frazier. The move of Tate Johnson might have helped them solidify the blocking aspect of that tight end spot.
Andy had a catch at the last practice viewing window we were at
Absolutely
before
did. Everybody went crazy.
Get him out in the flat. Watch him go to work.
If he catches a pass this season, that'll be something special. I mean, I'm trying to think of other positions. Maybe if like a young offensive lineman pops up in the portal and he wants to come potentially sit behind some guys or work in the rotation, I could see that, especially after you lost Braden Joyner. But I don't think they're going to be hunting for that necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, Freeze mentioned pass rusher, but haven't really seen them go after any of these edge guys.
That's probably the one spot where if an elite guy jumps in right now, that he could probably write his own check and tell, because everybody would take a guy like that. Doesn't matter how many of them you have, you would take that guy as your next guy too. So yeah, if there's one of those guys that decides he wants to come play around here at the last minute, there's probably going to be a hefty sum involved.
Yeah, worth noting. It probably goes without saying, but just because the portal will close doesn't say Auburn will have until whenever in terms of signing up for classes for the summer or for the fall. Like this can continue to go on a while. Like Jason said, if somebody pops up at some point, you could make a move on somebody. Freeze mentioned at one point in the spring, like he wished they had a little more personnel at wide receiver, but like, does that warrant getting someone in the portal? I don't know.
The odds that you can get a receiver to come into this room are next to zero. I mean, they tried for that. I think he was the Notre Dame transfer there at the very end of that last portal window. I honestly cannot even remember his name. I think he went to Virginia. They tried with him only because Sam Jackson left and they felt like they needed another guy. But
and that was before Sam Turner did what he did this spring too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think now you'd be really tough.
Receiver would be the same thing as quarterback in my book. It would be a couple years ago, Cassidy Woods.
Yep.
It would be a guy like that, a guy who comes in as maybe a really solid PWO, one of your last scholarship guys potentially, who just wants to work towards being a coach, stuff like that, and comes in this room. You're not going to get a young guy to come in. You're not going to get an older guy to come in.
That's it. Yeah. So you eliminate it. If you're not getting a young guy and you're not getting an older guy, then what are you getting?
Your future coach. That's about it.
Middle-aged man. Yeah, we'll be, of course, Christian and Jason will be on top of it these next several days. It'll hopefully calm down after the portal closes. Like Jason mentioned, like there will be time for them to continue to look.
Yeah, it'll be at least the goings in will slow down, other than maybe some grad transfers can still go in, do some of those things, but at least it'll slow down maybe some of that part.
I mean, as of right now, Rayshon Pleasant is the last visitor. There's nothing set up over the next couple of days, to my knowledge. Now, I asked about that a couple of hours ago at Monday night. Now, as we're recording, things could have changed. They changed quickly in the portal, but right now, Auburn's in a pretty solid spot. You kind of wait on Rayshon Pleasant, maybe keep evaluating some other corners, and you could be pretty well wrapped up for the spring portal.
Yeah, and yet another cycle here where I feel like this has been a theme for Hugh Freeze. They haven't taken that many losses. It's guys that you'd love to see how some of their careers pan out, right? Like that's always the case. But I feel like pretty much every semester, if you want to say, we sit here and we look at what they've lost in the portal, and we look at what's the composite production gain versus production lost, and it's like there's just no question they continue to really not lose anybody big from the depth chart. I mean, honestly, Braden Joyner, your backup center, probably is the one that you may circle a little bit. Tyler Scott, I think, was set up to be a good player in the future, but I mean, I don't even know how much those guys were going to play this year, if at all. So another, barring, we'll see if we get to Friday here, but it doesn't seem like Auburn's going to lose that much in the portal once again under this staff.
No, I mean, you start to think about the last couple of years and thinking about have you lost even a potential starter? And I don't think so. I mean, you think about Colton Hood probably would have had an opportunity to be in the mix. He would have been a guy that would have been close. Other than that, I don't know that you've lost anybody else. I thought would Braden Joyner's a guy that started some games last year, but as long as this group stays healthy, he was not going to be in the starting mix for this group. And so, they've done. It's been kind of maybe one of the least talked about things is how well they have kept their rosters together over the course of the last couple of years to have some third year guys on a team. That's pretty rare. And you look at that, the majority of these guys coming in, second, third year guys, you kept your freshman last year, and then you think Jeremiah Wright, but even a Dylan Wade is a third year transfer guy, and some of those pieces, you've been able to keep some of those guys on campus.
Yeah, I mean, even the closest they've come to losing a top guy in the portal was Amaris Williams, and they didn't lose him. They got him back
and had a good spring. And so,
yeah,
that was, and you're right. They've had a couple of those where you go, man, this guy can be close. And there's probably a lot more that you don't even know about. The guys go, hey, I'm going to go test the waters a little bit before I go into the portal. And that's just the world we live in. But kept those guys on campus. And I think about the Damari Austins, Jeremiah Cobb that have waited their turns, and Robert Woodyard. And, there's a group of guys on this team that have kind of paid some dues, and I think that'll pay off.
Yeah, it's a good nucleus, really, kind of across the board at a lot of different positions. I mean, I look at somebody like a Perry Thompson it's exciting the fact that he did not go that route, because now you're seeing the fruits of that, a full off season, spring. And he mentioned that in the spring, that it was kind of a humbling first season, but made the decision not to cut and run right away and just kind of see it through for another year or however long he's going to give it. And seems like he's definitely part of this rotation now. So yeah, I agree with you, Jason. I think it's been sort of an underrated storyline, something the staff has done pretty well. Well, Christian, unless there's anything else football wise that you want to touch on from the portal, I think we'll transition here to basketball. We will go into an ad break real quick, because that'll give Christian a chance to peace out, and then we'll talk about Auburn basketball and what they're doing in the transfer portal. Welcome back, everybody. Getting in now to Auburn basketball talk. It has been, it seems it's been a million years, it feels like, since they were playing in the Final Four. But even before that, even before their season ended, they got their first portal pickup in Keyshawn Hall. And I just think they've done about as good of a job as you could have done so far with this roster reload. But let's talk about some of these individual guys in these individual spots, Jason, because it's been a whirlwind couple weeks. The biggest news for them offseason wise that set a bunch of other things into motion was Chad Baker-Mazara. The fact that he is not, at least it doesn't appear now, that he is not coming back to Auburn. He has still not officially entered the transfer portal, but he said on social media last Thursday, as we record this here on Monday, that he's going to hit the portal. Since that time, Auburn has added another wing forward guard kind of guy. And to your point, as we've talked about a couple of times, they now have like three of the exact same player on the team. So
pretty much so.
If they were to bring him back, that would be your fourth 6'7", 6'8" guard forward. And so it just seems like the addition of Elijah Freeman sort of offset that. It really doesn't seem like Chad Baker-Mazara is going to come back now. But Jason, just when we'll just touch on Chad for a second. I mean, just again, another sort of window into the craziness that is the transfer portal nowadays. I mean, it's our understanding that we reported on our site several times that he did sign an NIL contract to stay with Auburn going into next season. What the ramifications are we're not going to attempt to speculate, because then, you don't want to be wrong when all this stuff is so complicated, but it's just another example of how this thing is just crazy and unpredictable, because before the Final Four even started, Auburn expected to have Chad back next season. But I think he's, look, he was your second leading scorer last year, and he had a phenomenal 2-year career at Auburn and was a really, really, really great player. But I do think it sort of opened a little more doors for you on this team next season. I don't think it was necessarily the end of the world that he's not going to be on this team next year.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're looking at going, you're going to be pretty much rebuilding. I mean, as it stands right now, if Todd Pettiford were to return, he would be the only guy back from last season. If I'm thinking correctly, that's a scholarship player.
Yep.
And so you're going to be rebuilding. But it kind of does feel like more of a reload than a rebuild. Now, you got a lot of pieces that haven't ever played together, and you're going to have to kind of fit them into the puzzle and see what happens. But, Nathan, you mentioned starting with the first guy you got. That 6'7", 225, led the Big 12 in scoring in conference games last year. Physical, powerful body, but can shoot the basketball. I mean, like, I don't know. That one feels like automatically you've added a dynamic scorer from the. I mean, here's the thing: we've been told too. He could play from the 1 to the 5 if you need him to. Probably feels more like, probably 1 defensively, 5 offensively, but 2, 3, 4 feels like a wheelhouse opportunity for him that you brought in, and I think that's a big spot to be in to start with.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about it last week after Chad left. Is like that just becomes more important by the day. Keyshawn Hall and the addition of him, like it's the positional versatility. When I asked Stephen Pearl about him after he signed at the Final Four, I was like, so he's a 2 through 4 for you guys, and like you said, like Stephen was like, no, I mean, probably not, not doing too much necessarily at the 5 position, but he was close to 300 pounds when he was a freshman at UNLV, sort of that Charles Barkley forward type build, and so lots of experience with a lot of different spots, lots of versatility. Where he starts on this team, because he's going to start. We'll see. There's a lot of questions still to be answered, but he fills so many potential gaps for you right now where you can really kind of be versatile with who you're looking for in the portal.
Yeah, and it might depend on how you want to play. And this team may be set up very differently than last season. Last year, you saw a team that had essentially 2 post players in that were the majority of your lineup. Next year, you might have a situation where you don't have a true post at all in a starting lineup. I mean, that's a very real possibility. Now, you bring in a 7-footer from junior college. I still think they'd probably like to add another true big, and if you could find a guy like that, then it might change things. But Hall's a guy that you feel like is probably a 3, but you also feel like could easily be a 4 in this system, especially if you decide, hey, you're going to play a little bit more up tempo, a little bit more spread. And I mean, but at 6'7", 225, it's essentially the same size as Chaney Johnson. So a guy that can give you some things there, even if you need to play him inside.
Yeah, and a couple of days after Baker Mazzara said he was going to go in the portal, it seemed like they sort of, you knew that they had the opportunity then to sort of up the aggression with Elijah Freeman. He was a Division II transfer who came in 6'8", just an extremely intriguing player who I think now he commits to Auburn over Tennessee and Indiana. I think now in terms of a ceiling, I mean, there's a lot of tools going on with Elijah Freeman. He's, as Bruce Pearl described him when he signed, again, another big guard, 6'8", not, just a little bit wiry, maybe a little bit more bulky than somebody like a Chad Baker Mazzara, but athleticism, shot 46% from deep. This is a guy that has some NBA tools. It looks like, is he ready to go right away in the SEC? Tennessee certainly thought so. There's a lot of potential, I think, with a guy like him, and he really sort of filled that. I wouldn't say he's going to be a 1-to-1 replacement for you at the 3 position, but a bigger wing that looks like he has room to grow still. I mean, he's an unrated recruit and blew up his freshman year at Lincoln Memorial.
Yeah, at the end, there's a couple of interesting things for me. First, he plays at Wellington High down in Palm. Like, he's played major competition in 6A basketball in Florida. So this is a guy that has played on, circuit, summer ball, all those things. Interesting, though, that as a probably more of a 6'6" power forward in high school because of his size, a guy that I think a lot of people just overlooked. And now he's a 6'8" guard. You look at the difference. And I hate to do this, but everybody always wants comparisons. And the only one I come back to with this guy is Corey Brewer that played on those Florida national championship teams. I look at the length and the ability to put the ball on the floor and make passes and do the stuff. And he just looks like one of those really long, big guys, but he looks like a 2 guard. This is not a guy that looks like we're going to try to play this guy at guard, even though he's not guy. He looks like a guy that can play the 2. And so I like it when you start talking about length. This is a long basketball team, even though you may not be as big physically. in the paint, you're going to have a bunch of length, especially on the perimeter, and that's going to be a really different look for this team.
Yeah, you mentioned, where he might play, whether it's guard or whether it's a small forward. It goes back to the versatility that we talked about. Like this team, I think, and like we talked about, one more guy, probably, maybe you could swing for two. It just depends. But, we definitely think they want to add another big guy. But once everybody's in place, maybe we'll have a little bit better of understanding. But I still think this is going to be a team we're going to get deep into the summer before we even try to figure out what these lineups are going to look like. I think it's going to be more so of like, here are your best 6 or 7 players who are going to play a lot of minutes, and these other guys are going to fill in because there's so many different spots.
And then everything right now hinges on Todd Pettiford too.
Correct.
Because until that happens, you don't really know then what it's going to look like, because you don't want to have to depend on Cade Magwood to be a point guard right out of the gate. And you start thinking about that going, do you potentially go get another one of those types of 1-2 guys anyway, just in case, because, then you start talking about it. Again, there's a lot of questions that you're right, are still left to be unanswered for this team. But the pieces we know right now, I feel like it's going to be a pretty talented roster that especially from a scoring standpoint. I think you're going to have more scoring options than Auburn basketball teams had in a while. Now, do you have one Jabari Smith, or do you have one Janai Broome? Maybe not, but it feels like you got a lot more potential 12 to 14 kind of guys.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And if Todd Pettiford is back, you're wanting him to be a big focal point.
Yes.
Of that. Let's talk just quickly about some of the other guys they added. Keyshawn Murphy is a guy we've talked about a lot since they got him over from Mississippi State. Adds to that versatility because we think he can be a 4 or a 5, but so many skills. And he was somebody, Jason, that came off the bench last season, only played 24 minutes a night. And yet you look at his numbers. He's the number 1 returning player in the SEC in overall player efficiency rating, PER. So that's pretty good. That's a good place to start. He was number 5 in the league in 2-point field goals made. Just despite playing as little minutes as he did compared to some of these other guys. And good rebounder, good defender, has a lot of size, has a lot of athleticism. A worthy, not replacement. Again, we're not, but Auburn had to reload at a lot of these positions. He's not going to be Janai Broome. You're not going to have a big guy that's like potentially your best player in program history. But I really like the idea of what Keyshawn Murphy could do in this Auburn system, and it's a marriage that's maybe been, as we've mentioned a few times for us, maybe been a few years coming for this program.
It has. I've known him since, I don't know, he's in the 10th grade, coming to Auburn basketball camps at Ramsey High School, and I called him, and he called me back a little later, and he said, "Hey, yeah, your number was still in my phone." So we talked on it when he was driving back to Birmingham, and he said, "Look, kind of been waiting on this one," and I think the thing that maybe for me is I've hyped him up a lot, because I watched him play as a 2 guard in high school, and he's transitioned to a power forward. And, maybe it was more of a system thing, but, what was he, 4 of 27 or something like that from 3. He didn't shoot very many, only made a handful, but I think he's a guy that can shoot the basketball. I think that's in his game. And I think coming to Auburn, he's going to get that opportunity to shoot the basketball. Like when they get here this summer, he will work on shooting a 3. He'll work on, perimeter game. And I think he brings a lot of that versatility. So he's not going to be back to the basket, post up moves. Now, he can do some of those things, but it's not going to be the Janai Broome. Hey, let's face it. And Janai Broome has been the unicorn of college basketball, other than like a guy like Zach Edey, just because of his size. Nobody's played that way in a decade, and that's why it was so effective, really. But Keyshawn Murphy is a guy that I think is going to be a really good fit.
Yeah, their only other big man addition right now is Emeka Oporum, who played at Butler Community College in Kansas, and it's just potential is that guy. Athletic ability, it's through the roof. I asked you that day, I was like, when you went and talked to him, I was like, is he a true 7-footer? And you're like, oh my goodness, absolutely. So that's a really intriguing backup center.
I think a guy that's probably 210 right now at 7 foot tall, which is thin, but I think he's a guy that could easily be 225, 230 by the time you get there. really only played organized basketball in the States for a little over a year. And so the one thing about him, though, is there's not going to be a real language barrier. He was really good. His English was great. Parents are engineers. So this is a guy that is going to be able to pick things up quickly. That's one thing you kind of get worried about sometimes is maybe a language barrier for people who aren't as comfortable playing a game, makes it more difficult to learn. I don't think he's going to have that problem. And so I think that'll be helpful for him. And hey, if you can get 12 to 15 minutes a game, 6 or 7 minutes a half, 3 or 4 block shots and some rebounds a game, then that would be a really good start and get you moving. And hey, and then if you develop the pick and roll moves and kind of some of the Walker Kessler offense to go along with it, then, because of a guy especially like Keyshawn Murphy, he's going to be out. You're going to have some movement around the basket for a guy like that to work.
Yeah, Lagos, Nigeria. He's only been in the States, like you mentioned, not very long. But he was part of the Africa NBA sort of developmental program, and so just go turn on his tape. I would encourage a lot of people. Just a really, really intriguing player, and somebody I know they're going to have a lot of fun sort of building over what they hope is the next couple years. The only guy we hadn't touched on was somebody flying a little bit under the radar. Kevin Overton was a commit from Texas Tech. He was their 6th man last season on that team that went to the Elite Eight. 6'5". Jason mentioned the length of this team. Continues to have to be the case at another position. He's a 6'5", probably a true 2 guard. He, again, came off the bench for Texas Tech, 7.8 points per game, 33% from deep is manageable. But sort of poking around, Jason, I looked at him and sort of looked at what some Texas Tech fans were saying, and somebody who's really, really active in a lot of areas of the game. His steal rate is really, really good. Physical defender, guy who plays really, really hard on defense. So kind of fits that. And Denver Jones did a lot of things for this team, and it's going to be really tough to replace somebody like him. But sort of filling that almost a amalgamation of like Chris Moore, Denver Jones, of like be a shot maker, be a guy who gives you minutes at guard, be somebody who plays really hard on defense. And my thing too is just be a veteran who knows how to win, like who was on a really good team last year. Because like you mentioned, Jason, like these guys are gonna have to learn how to play together. It is not going to be the instant chemistry of last year's team where they brought back so many seniors. So having a guy like this who's done it at a high level was an important player on a good Texas Tech team, good Texas Tech program. I think was a good pickup for them.
Yeah, and I think too, this is a guy that was known more as a shooter coming out of high school, and when he went to Drake, and then you get to Texas Tech, and it's grinded out defense kind of game. And I think you look, and I kind of went back and looked, and I guess it kind of got lost for me a little bit. But this guy started every game as a true freshman at Drake, with 62 of 179 from 3, which is 35%. But this guy that was like 80% from the free throw line, and it's a bigger body at 6'5", 200. So again, you start talking about potential. This feels like a guy that has a lot more offense in his game than maybe people might believe. When you average 11 points, Drake's a pretty good basketball program. And so you go 11.3 points a game as a true freshman. Then you kind of have to take maybe a little bit of a backseat role last year. I think it's a guy that has a lot of game that maybe is getting a little bit overlooked because of some of maybe the other big names.
Yeah, and like we talked about, we definitely think one more is in the pipeline here. At some point, they have just put themselves in a position, though, where I don't know if slow play is the right word, but you do not have to, go all hands in at this point for another big man. You and I talked about on the phone the other day, like if you could duplicate Keyshawn Murphy, that's the other guy you'd want, like another 4/5. So I think, Jason, it depends on who's in the portal, I think is what they get. If there's a really good face-up 4-man to kind of fill that spot for you, go get him and let Keyshawn Murphy be the 5. If there's a 6'11", rebounding, a fundamentally, solid center you think could translate right away in the SEC, let that guy fill that spot. Let Keyshawn Murphy play more 4. And so I really think they put themselves in a position here to where they can just kind of feel things out. But definitely when they see the right guy, expect them to be aggressive with that person, because it's like defensive tackle in football, though, is the thing. Like, in terms of quality centers, everybody's going to want one. And so it's easier said than done. That's why it's so important they got Keyshawn Murphy.
Yeah, and hey, if you could find a 6'10", 250 the guy that you say, hey, this guy can play, 25 minutes a game, give you 8 points, 8 rebounds, shoot free throws, knock down a couple of threes. I think about watching Creighton play or Iowa, somebody like that, with such a dynamic, long roster, having a guy that can step out and make shots with this much. And hey, all these guys can take the ball to the basket, do things too. Boy, if you could find somebody like that just to go, hey, the ultimate role player. And I think about the Chicago Bulls teams when Jordan was so good, whether it was Bill Winnington or Luke Longley or those guys, they had guys in those roles that said, look, they're going to play intense physical defense in the paint. They're going to rebound. And if you leave them open, they're going to knock down a shot. You don't have to have a superstar 4 or 5 to finish off this roster, but having another one of those bigger bodies would be helpful.
Yep. I will always point to a freshman. Devin Cambridge was a June commitment. I'll always point to first-year Javon McCormick, who was very, very instrumental on that Final Four team before he became the team's starting point guard, was a July commitment for Auburn. And so you don't rush this. I don't think Auburn's going to rush this. But as we talked about, could there be space for another spot? Maybe. If the right guy comes along, like the name RJ Lewis from St. John's sort of generated a little bit of buzz. And I think you filled a good bit of that gap with a guy like Freeman. But I think the right way to look at him is like, well, if you thought you had the opportunity and the resources, you'd make a spot for him.
Yeah, 100%.
That goes for every team in the country, though, is the thing for
Yep, that's it. No question. I think as we talked about football, what's left, you go, what's left is, hey, can you find the guy that makes us better? If Auburn says, hey, this is a guy that makes us a better basketball team, then regardless of position, you do it and you figure it out. Because you do have some position versatility where we talked about, Keyshawn Murphy could be a 5 or a 4. You're talking about a Keyshawn Hall could be 2 through 4. You got some of those guys, and then we were talking about, we haven't really touched on, but think about a Bashir coming in, could be a 2 or a 3 with his long length. And then you got a lot of position versatility, and that would allow you to go, hey, best available and see what happens. Again, all dependent on Todd Pettiford. If that one were to feel like it's trending to NBA, then you're 100% pushing all your resources towards the point guard position to finish this thing out, at least in my opinion.
And you'll be able to do that because you will then, if you're not have Todd Pettiford back and you're not paying him next year,
you'll have a little extra.
Have a little bit left over, like they did, I think, when Chad Baker-Mazara situation happened. And you can sort of say, all right, well, while he was a really good player for them, you can sort of shift some of those resources. And so I think this team has done about as good as a job as they could have in terms of reloading. And we haven't even mentioned a guy like Sebastian Williams-Adams, who is like a top 60 recruit who has like tons of wingspan and athleticism. Like,
I think all-time assist leader at his high school too. So this guy that understands, can play basketball, 6'8", 230, can put it on the floor. I mean, you think about those additions as well. And this is a roster that's going to have, and it's weird saying this, and we're sitting here on April 21st, and you don't know how this thing's going to shape up. But I mean, if you're just talking about, hey, the ability to score the basketball and just straight up talent, this group may be more talented than last year's group in terms of just that one thing. But the chemistry and all the things that went into that team to make it what it was are going to be really, really difficult to duplicate. But the good starting point is to be talented, and I think this roster is going to have some talent.
I would agree with you. I think in a vacuum, and maybe if Janai Broom is having a little bit of an off night, but like in a vacuum, maybe 1 through 5 is a little bit scarier and more potent just offensively across the floor. My biggest question with this team is what is there, and they've done a good job throughout the Bruce Pearl era, but it's like changing your half-court identity. Yeah. Like you mentioned, it's going to take such a 180 from what they did with Janai Broom.
Correct. Yeah. Can you get back to being that up-court tempo, not run and gun, but I think you want to speed things up, dramatically, especially, depending if Keyshawn Murphy's playing the 5, then you're going to be a smaller, longer, more athletic group. Then you might want to get out and say, hey, we're fixing to put some pressure on you and get up and down the court pretty quickly.
It's going to be, it's not necessarily going to be run and gun, but it's going to be guard driven, I think is kind of the way to look at it. Whereas last year was obviously so center driven.
Yeah.
So really fun show. Really enjoyed it with you and Christian. It's man, it's crazy to keep track of what's going on in the transfer world. But we will talk to you guys soon. Hope everybody enjoyed it. We'll probably call it there at the 50-minute mark. So for Jason Caldwell, Christian Clemente, I am Nathan King. Be sure to head over to auburnundercover.com. Talk to y'all soon.